All right, folks, so what's the situation here on this warm-up? Describe for me what's happening.
The number of pictures.
Okay. What is that being represented by, the number of pictures? X is my number of pictures. Right now I don't know what that is, right? What's the Y representing? The cost. What does the 0.25 mean? It's 25 cents for every what? Picture. Awesome. So it says write an equation in function notation. Does everybody see the equation they already give to me up there? Do y'all see that? How do I turn an equation into function notation? What is function notation? What's function notation? Function notation. Function notation.
Function. Like
F of, normally it's f of x, isn't it? Yeah, we have x's in this, don't we? Okay, so f of x is equal to 0.25x. Remember, folks, f of x and y mean the same thing. They mean the same thing. Everybody okay with that? See how I just swapped them in and out? Okay, now it says find f of 5 and f of 12. How do I find f of 5? X equals 5, you plug the 5 in for x. What will it look like if I do that, folks? Wonderful. Isn't that what we're doing? We're taking out the x, we're putting in the 5. So what do you get? And we're talking about money here, aren't we? Okay. How do I then find f of 12? Do the same, but with 12, she says. What's it cost me? Okay, so somebody describe for me what this means. If f of 5 is $1.25, just tell me a sentence of what that means. Perfect. For 5 pictures, it costs $1.25. How about for f of 12? For 12 pictures, it costs $3. Everybody okay here? Okay, now letter C says determine the domain and range. Guys, what is domain? What is domain? Yep, it's the horizontal one. What's horizontal? Yeah, what is that axis called? It's the x-axis. Guys, domain are the x's, correct? What is x representing in this problem? The number of pictures, right? Tell me about numbers that I can plug in for number of pictures. Only whole numbers. Can I have a fraction of a picture? How about negative pictures? No. So my domain is going to be whole numbers. Now, whole numbers are always positive. If I want to include the negative ones, Savannah, I call them integers. You guys all remember that word integer? Okay, so now let's talk about the range. Ranges are y's, right? What are the y's representing in this problem? The cost. Tell me about numbers that I can have for cost. I can have a quarter, right? Isn't that a decimal? Anything that's not negative, he says. Does that make sense to you all? But they could be decimals, right? So when they're non-decimals, they're called whole numbers. What are they called when they're decimals? What's the math word for decimals or fractions? It's part of it is on your sheet in front of you. Ratio is part of the word that means fraction. You gotta add a little ending to it. Add a little end to it. Rational. Rational. Guys, rationals can be decimals or fractions. Now, but we said we can't have negatives, right? Can't have negative money. Rationals include negatives. So I want to say the positive rationals is what I will get for the y's. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. Leads me right in. This is a perfect segue into the word ratio, which is your first vocabulary word, right? A ratio is a comparison of two numbers. Guys, what do ratios look like? Yep, that's called a colon. A dot dot B. What else could a ratio look like? That's an inequality that you're thinking about. Oh yeah, it could be any variable. I'm saying instead of using the dot dot, what else could I do? Actually, it's the word to. So we would say A to B, like girls to boys, or cats to dogs, or whatever it might be. Apples to oranges. Fair enough? There's one more way, and it's the way that we're going to focus on today. What do you see all over your sheet? Yeah, there's commas. They're all fractions, aren't they? You guys see all those fractions? Guys, don't fractions have to have two numbers? Yeah, one on top, one on bottom. That's a comparison of two numbers. We are going to focus on fractions today. Fraction and ratio mean the same thing. Fair enough? Okay, so I want to know if these things are equivalent. What does equivalent mean? How do I figure that out? What do you mean by simplify them? Doesn't a fraction bar mean to divide? So if I divide them, I can figure out what they actually are and then say if they're equal or not. It is or it isn't. You're either going to tell me yes or no. Okay. So what do I get for 6 over 10? What do I get for 2 over 5? Are they equivalent? Okay. Will you please go through and do 1 through 4? I should see decimals being written, and then I should see yeses and nos. That's fine. You know how to write a repeating decimal. What does the... I want you to write it as a repeating decimal. So the bar would go over what part? Correct. It would not go over the 1. It would just go over the 6. Does everybody understand what she's saying? The bar is just going to go over the 6. The 1 does not repeat. The 6 repeats. When somebody gets to that last one, can you tell me what decimals you get? 0.41. What repeats? Just the 6? Okay. And then how about, is that the right decimal? Okay. And this was a no, right? Does anybody have any questions on these answers? Does anybody want to talk about any of them? Did you get the same decimals that I did? Are you sure? We're okay? Okay, so let's move on then. These are ratios. I didn't tell you whether or not they were equal. You had to find that out, correct? There's another way that we can do that besides just dividing. It's called a proportion. A proportion is a fraction equal to a fraction. And it looks something like this. And I know that you have seen these before. What do I do with them? You are going to use cross multiplying. So, if you look at your directions, it says, determine if the pair of ratios form a proportion. Do I say that it's a proportion? Oh, no, I don't, right? I have to see if they actually are equal. So I am going to set them equal. And then I'm going to cross multiply to see if it all works out. When I say cross multiply, what does that mean to do? That times that, and then that times that. What do I get if I take 0.2 times 0.9? How about if I do 1.8 times 1? Folks, would it matter if I had it in this order or if I had it in this order? Does that matter? No. Are they the same? Say what? Those are not the same. That decimal point is not in the same place. How are we doing there? Okay, so let's try another one. I'm going to ask myself, are these things equivalent, meaning do they form a proportion? So what are you going to multiply? What does that give you? And then what else are you going to multiply? Which gives you? Do they form a proportion? No. All right, folks, I want you to go through and do the other two. Really, this is the same thing what you were just doing with the dividing. It's just a different way to look at it. What's that number? Like that? So that's a no, right? Oh boy, I hope one of these is a yes. They are. Questions, guys? No questions for me at all here? Okay, so now let's introduce a variable to it. So if you flip over your page, you will see that the problem already has an equal sign in it, doesn't it? So I am telling you they have to be equal. The question is, what are you going to plug in for r to make them equal? We're still going to cross multiply. Now I want to preface this real quick. I know that they had taught you to just multiply and divide, right? Multiply first, then divide. You are not going to be able to do that when we get to something that looks like this, or when we get to something that looks like this. Does everybody understand? So please do not multiply and divide. Please write them out, and we're going to show our work. Okay? Because it won't work for these other harder ones. Trevor, you want to try it? Go ahead. Which is what? Okay, how about the other way then? What's r times 40? Good. How's everybody doing here? That makes sense? Would it be okay if you wrote it as 40r equals 200? Means the same thing. How do I solve that now for r? Divide by 40. So the 40s will cancel. And what do you get? So putting a 5 up there where that r is will make the fractions equivalent. Can I prove it to you? You ready? If I put a 5 up there, that says 5 divided by 8, doesn't it? Grab your calculators. Do 5 divided by 8, please. Okay, let's remember that number, okay? Now, 25 divided by 40. They're the same, aren't they? Guys, that's not magic, it's math, okay? It's just good math. Everybody okay here? Okay, let's look at the next one then. What do you think? What's my setup for this next one? What's it going to look like when you cross multiply for this one? 36, which is 12 times 3. How we doing, folks? How would you solve it? So if I put a 4.5 up there, it makes them equal. Pretty good? Can we move on to something a little bit harder? Okay, now you will see that up top here, I have an x plus 4, don't I? Can I put them together and make it 4x? No. Thank you for saying no. You can't. You still have to cross multiply though, right? That will give me 36. Now this here, I have to take that x plus 4 and I have to multiply by 4, don't I? So we're going to say 4 times x plus 4, and you'll notice I put those in parentheses to keep them together. And I'm pretty sure you can guess what I'm going to do with it, right? Okay, bless you, when you distribute, you get 4x plus 16. Everybody following that okay? And that's an equation you should know how to solve, right? How do I solve that? Okay, so now what do I have? Oh, no. Nope. 20 equals 4x. And then you're going to do what next? X is equal to 5. How do we feel about that? Not too bad, right? Okay, let's do the setup for the next one then. Yes, absolutely. What would you write for the next one here, folks, by cross multiplying? Good. Please don't forget the parentheses. All right, folks, you go ahead and distribute, and then you go ahead and solve it. Don't be alarmed when you get a decimal. Why don't you give me the decimal representation and the fraction representation? Bless you. That's the fraction representation. Are we okay with that? Can you read me that decimal representation again? 2.125, like that? Is either answer better than the other? Nope. It's all personal preference. Questions for me? Well, I got 2 more I'm going to do. We're going to call it a day. Okay? All right, what's the setup for number 5? If I'm going to cross multiply, what's it going to look like?
Plus 14. Parentheses. 10.
How's everybody doing? 10's out front? Okay, what about the other side then?
Equals 30. See 6J plus 30.
All right, go ahead and distribute, please. Make sure you distribute to both numbers. How we do with the distributing, okay? Did you get your J's together? What did you do to get your J's together? So I have 140 is equal to 100J plus 60. So far, so good? What are we going to do next? So that'll make what, 80? Last step. What is the decimal representation of 0.8? Should be 4/5. Does everybody remember how to turn decimals into fractions on their calculators? Anybody need a quick reminder? We're all good. Okay, you guys are going to do number 6. Start to finish. Go ahead. Awesome. Make sure we distribute carefully. And then make sure you move your smaller m over.
Oh, my hand hurts after that.
What's that?
My hand hurts.
What'd you get?
11.
Questions for me, folks. How are proportions for us? Just fine? Okay. Homework. Is going to be this. What's that? Oh, I forget what I gave fourth period.
Even?
It's going to be even, but I forget where I stopped at. And I forget what I gave fourth period, so that's not good. All right, folks, I hope you have a good weekend.